Hi, Snehal. Welcome to Venture with Grace.
Great to be here. I appreciate the invite.
Okay, so to start with the show, I would love for the audience to get to know you a little bit more. You have held previous a lot of different top tech company positions. So for example, the most recently you were the SVP of Splunk, and then before that you were at GE Capital as a CIO. So why don't we talk about what were some core career lessons that you've learned early on in your career? Also, you spent over 10 years at IBM. Why don't we talk about what are some core lessons that you've learned early on in your career that kind of shape you into who you are today?
Sure. So my background, I'm a software engineer by education and trade,
Mhm,
but I got into tech when I was very young from my dad. But if you
mhm,
fast forward after my time at IBM, I was a CIO at GE Capital, and then I
mhm,
was a CTO at Splunk. And then at the end of 17, I left industry altogether to serve within US Special Operations for about 4 years,
mhm,
serving as the first chief technology officer at JSOC. Hardest, most meaningful work of my career. And that's where I met my co-founder Tony and the early team at Horizon 3. And when they
mhm,
retired from the military and I finished my time at JSOC, we started Horizon 3 together. But if I were
mhm,
to summarize, key aspects of the way I think about career, it's all about purpose and impact, right? Solve problems that I actually cared about or that were interesting to me. It was about being a learn it all. So keeping my mouth shut, listening and learning to
mhm,
understand and learn from people around me that I looked up to. And then it was about letting results do the talking. Um, and and you only do that by actually delivering consistently through up cycles and down cycles. And so
mhm,
I've picked every job I picked was intentionally taken not for salary. In fact, I took a pay cut in several occasions, but rather I optimized for jobs where I could learn the most and grow the most, knowing that it was a marathon. And as I mastered each area that was relevant to me, I'd be in a spot to be able to successfully run a company.
mm. I wonder, so what was it like to working at the JSOC? I mean, obviously, I feel like it's such a mystery, but I guess what would be the core KPI or your day to day kind of look like?
So the first JSOC's like Bruno, you don't talk about it if you ever
Okay.
watched that Disney movie. But
Mhm,
what I'll tell you is this: um, what makes JSOC or special operations generally the highest performing organization in the world, I think, are three things. The
mhm,
first is they empower those closest to the problem to get the job
mhm,
done. So they have this incredible trust of those in the middle ranks that are actually tasked with doing the thing.
mhm,
Whereas in traditional military and traditional organizations, it tends to be top down and hierarchical. So they
mhm,
empower those closest to the problem. The
mhm,
second thing is around shared understanding.
mhm,
It doesn't and mission outcome. So if you think about in business, you have OKRs. Like my marketing
mhm,
team did really well, but we missed the number.
mhm,
Or the product team delivered everything on time, but we have high competitive losses. Just because a single function did well doesn't mean you achieve the mission objective. And so the only metric that matters in the world of JSOC and special operations is the mission outcome. And everybody is measured along the same way. So the concept of OKRs in high performing teams shouldn't actually exist. It's all about the outcome. And the only
mhm,
way to achieve that outcome is shared understanding and of the problem set. And so everyone understands what's going on. They all talk about potential problems early to maximize decision space. And that
mhm,
shared understanding reduces mission risk. And I think the third thing that makes those organizations high performing is cadence. And so you look at the cadence that they establish to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that there
mhm,
is a high degree of transparent and honest discussion of what's actually going on. It's not about blame or who done it. It's here's exactly the situation and what are we going to do about it together as a team. And it's about using cadence to drive people towards accountability. I think that's what makes up those high performing teams. And those are probably the biggest organizational lessons I learned from JSOC that I've absolutely applied at Horizon 3.
mm. I wonder, so why don't we talk about Horizon 3. So you started the company in 2019. What were the original products? And obviously I feel though I'm not as much of a security expert as you, but um I feel like security space in general is a very popular space these days because of like AI. So like, but you since like you started back in 2019, what were the problem that you felt like was worth solving? Obviously, I think you guys help different company to like protect or like detect the attack earlier than like when it needed to be detected. Like that's like the best way as like a normie to frame it. But like I guess like I'll let you start with like, what were the original problem that you were solving, and then how did the product kind of evolve to what it is today?
Yeah. So at a high level, we pioneered this concept of AI hackers. That's
Mhm,
what we pioneered. Um, while we filed the incorporation paperwork in October 2019, the first payroll in the company really started January 2020. We launched the first version of our product at the end of 2020, so around September, October 2020. And
mhm,
since then, over the last 5 years, we've scaled to 3,500 companies using us globally. We'll be one of the fastest companies to hit 100 million in ARR or revenue based on our plan. Sometime first half of next year, I think, is when we'll do it. We'll have gone from a
mhm,
million to 100 million in revenue in less than 5 years, and we'll have done so efficiently, where we're rule of 40 positive already today. And rule of 40 in business is an X-ray. I think I call it the BS X-ray machine. Like, do you
mhm,
actually have an economically viable company? If you
mhm,
do, you've got a path to rule of 40 positive. But if you sell a candy bar for $1 and it costs you $3 to make that candy bar, and you're losing money on every deal, like pets,
mhm,
whatever that pet food company was back in the .com era, you're not
mhm,
economically viable. And so that's really important, especially in the age of AI. So with that said, when I was a CIO, I had no idea I was secure until the bad guys showed up. Are we
mhm,
fixing the right problems? Does my team know how to respond to a breach? Are all of our security tools actually working? And the answer is I don't know. I either wait to get hacked or hack myself as often as possible.
mhm,
And that's what we enable. Our t-shirts literally say, go hack yourself. And our customers
mhm,
hack their entire network to figure out how they can be compromised so they can fix problems that actually matter.
mhm. Okay, so I have so many questions there. So, like, when you were thinking about the unit economics for your own company, like you mentioned, like you guys will hit like $100 million ARR within 5 years. So, like, when you first started the company, did you already have the like unit economics like calculate in your head, or like did it like kind of like evolve? And then how do you kind of like think about like, if 3K customer divide like, using, like, 100 million I guess, like, divided by 3K customer, like, is everybody paying the same? Or, like, do you have to land, 10 big corporate client and then, like, 400, like, mid-size? Or, like, how do you
Yeah.
think about these different kind of, like, strategic, I guess, client acquisition strategies based off the original
Yeah. So
goal?
let's talk about go to market generally for a moment. So first
Mhm,
and foremost, in the earliest stages of a company, when you first have your founding team, the
mhm,
idea doesn't actually matter. What
mhm,
matters is the early team you formed, because whatever idea you came up with is going to change as you talk to prospects and customers. And so
mhm,
you need that early team to have deep subject matter expertise, have an opinion of what the problem should look like because they've lived in the shoes of their customers or their users,
mhm,
and they're able to quickly pivot and iterate. So they're not building to a religion, they're understanding the problem and iterating accordingly. And by the way, that's a huge problem. A lot of early stage founders become very religious about their idea, and they're going to build their idea regardless of what the market tells them, and then they eventually go out of business. So the earliest stages, it's about the team, not the idea, and how quickly you can iterate. Now the next part is I've got a pretty straightforward formula. What budget dollars am I targeting? What
mhm,
stories must I tell to take those dollars? And what key aha moments must the user experience in order to advocate for the purchase of our product? And it's really important to be thoughtful of that upfront because that dictates your go to market motion, that dictates the stories you're going to go off and tell, that dictates how you're going to enable your sales reps to prospect and hunt.
mhm,
That also dictates the product's user experience. And if you don't have crystal clear alignment across those three dimensions,
mhm,
you're going to struggle and have a lot of rework. And so for early founders and for us, we were crystal clear in those three things. And so the initial product, we went after the pen test consulting budget. My primary competitors were mediocre consultants. We're able
Mhm.
to close deals in 6 to 8 weeks, which was unheard of because we had a well-defined budget. We knew exactly what stories to tell. For every patch Tuesday, you want a pen test Wednesday. Why pay a mediocre consultant to test a small part of your environment? Pay a world-class hacker to test all of your environment for the same or cheaper price. And then here are the well-defined aha moments. Run a pen test, fix a bunch of problems that matter, run a retest to verify you're good to go, tell your boss, go home, spend time with the family. And as we perfected those three moves, we started to build momentum. And so we got to, I think, 100 customers within a year of launching the product. Even today, about 27% of my revenue each quarter is same quarter close, which is unheard of in cybersecurity. That means we found the opportunity, qualified them, did the POV, and converted them within the quarter with an average sales cycle of 32 days. And it goes back to those same three fundamental things: the budget dollars, the stories we've got to tell, and the aha moments to achieve.
Wow, you're such a I'm sorry, I'm, like, blown away by your, like, entire ability to, like, communicate your vision as well as, like, in, like, a really clear manner, and then you really quantify it in, like, the number specific way or, like, just, like, with specific details. How do you learn about, like, how to sell something? Because I feel like based off your past job, I don't think you need to sell that much.
Well, one, when you think about selling, there are a couple of aspects to selling. The first is, can you actually passionately tell a story? And
Mhm,
from the early days, I've always been passionate or obsessed with things that interest me. And so I get really
mhm,
fired up. If you talk to me about anything that
mhm,
I'm passionate for, the Patriots, or things my kids are into, or so on and so forth, you will see, or I talk about my time at JSOC, you
mhm.
will see my face absolutely light up and my passion and enthusiasm reach through the screen or affect you. And you can't fake that. If you are not obsessed with what you do, if you don't deeply care about the problems you're working on, you're not going to be obsessed. You're not going to be excited about it. And the other side of it's going to know. And geez, if this person isn't excited and it's their life, why should I be excited? So step one is you actually have to care deeply about the problem you're solving. The second part is you've got to be good at telling stories. And I was actually terrible at presenting early on in my career. I realized I had to get better at it. And the way I got better was I learned how to tell jokes better. If you're a good joke teller, you're going to be a pretty good public speaker. Think about telling a joke. You're not going to tell a joke saying like, knock, knock, who's there? Chicken, chicken, blah, blah. There's a tone to it. There's a pause. There's an intonation in your voice. There's delivering the punchline. And so if you're really good at telling a joke, which has a 30 to 60-second life's attention span, well, giving a keynote in front of 10,000 people is basically telling 5 to 15 jokes. That's it. And
Oh
every
my
slide is
god.
that punchline. So if you're not good at public speaking, go take an improv class. Go learn how to tell jokes with your friends at the pub or at parties or whatever. And you're going to absolutely suck at the beginning. And then you're going to get better, and that's how you become a better speaker. I think the third part is it's a huge advantage when you've held the jobs of the people that you're trying to sell to. I've held or overseen most of the jobs held by my users. And so I can speak very passionately and empathetically about the problems I went through when I was in their chair, about the frustrations I felt, what I wish I had. And that empathy and connection allows you to cut through the marketing hype and really focus on the pain points that are triggering for that
Mhm.
individual.
I wonder, so how do you like going back to the last, like, I mean, obviously now I'll have to like take an improv class again, but okay, so thinking about like you're achieving like $100 million ARR. So let's say, um, I like what you said about like you have like a formula to like sell to different people, and like you create you create like the aha moments, and then you advocate like the purchase. But I wonder, when I guess like when you're identifying who is your ideal customer, like who was like the first three people that you sold to, and then like how do you kind of like categorize the bigger company, the smaller company, or just like any company
Yeah.
into different
So,
categories?
so when you think about segmentation, um, there's two. there are basically, I think, three fundamental philosophies. The first philosophy is to go whale hunting. You're only going to sell to the top 500 companies in the world. You
Mhm.
want to go really big. So a few deals with really large sales prices. And that feels awesome when you close those deals. But when you're halfway through the quarter and you're either going to miss badly or beat incredibly, all
Mhm.
based on one deal, that's not a good place to be in, especially as an early stage founder. You don't have any predictability of cash flow. You don't have
Mhm.
any predictability of sales cycle, of revenue, of anything like that. And so the extreme opposite approach of that is almost a consumer self-service, like pure PLG motion, kind of what happened to Zoom, where you didn't talk to a Zoom sales rep, you just bought a seat. And when you needed more, you bought more seats. You did all of that self-service. That doesn't really work in cybersecurity because in cybersecurity, you've got a last mile trust issue. Uh, Cybersecurity is such a complex, sensitive business. You do need to have some touch points, oftentimes fulfilled by channel partners that are in the region. So, really successful scaled security companies work well with the channel. They work well with resellers and so on. So, with that, how do you build a channel first sales motion that is high velocity so you can get that revenue prediction, but that allows you to move up market when you're ready? That's exactly the way we did it. So, we first focused on mid market companies where IT also owns security. Users are barely treading water, they're struggling to prioritize. And if we can solve an immediate pain, and I know exactly what budget to take, I can get a really fast sales cycle. And that's exactly what we focused on. I didn't even care about the total contract value. I cared about fast sales cycle. Just pay me whatever you want. It doesn't even matter. I just want to close as quickly as possible. And that allowed us to build a predictable cash flow motion. That's why in the early days, I actually didn't need to raise a lot of money. In fact, I only did a $5 million Series A, which is unheard of. And that's
Mhm.
because we were really cash flow efficient and we were able to build that high velocity motion. Datadog actually really perfected this motion in their early days. And then New Relic and others followed suit. But then as you start to build momentum, you start to learn how to work with channel partners and resellers to run that last mile for you, and your product starts to mature, then you start to move up market. So we started to move into lower enterprise, upper enterprise, and now majors. And so we've got, a top 5 global company all the way down to the local law firm working with us. By doing that, I built a foundational kind of flow revenue stream through that
Mhm.
mid-market lower enterprise. And then as we moved up market, those really big deals allowed us to beat and raise on our forecast. And that's exactly, I think, the motion you want to get to be an economically viable and an efficient growth company.
I have a question for you. So, like, after you land a customer, like, after you gave them like the quick win and then they landed, and like, how do you do the post sale journey? Just because I think one of the major problems, maybe like security is like a really necessity space. It's kind of like a painkiller than like, you're selling some sort of vitamin because every company have to be secure whatsoever. And like, but I think the major problem is like, how do you demonstrate that, like, hey, here's like what I have saved you? And like, obviously like there is people may like adopt or like, think like, how often that's like the security problem actually exists, yada yada yada. Like maybe people focus on revenue and stuff like that. So like, how do you tie it into like the corporate buyers like mindset to like continuously working with you guys versus like
Yeah.
a competitor?
So if you think about 2020 till now, in January 2020, when we started, that was 3 months before COVID hit.
Hmm.
And then you had the venture hype cycle of 2021. Then you had
Hmm.
effectively the venture crash, pause or crash in 22, 23. Then
Hmm.
you had macroeconomic headwinds.
Hmm.
Throughout all of that, Silicon Valley Bank collapsed, right?
Hmm.
And so it hasn't been a smooth economic situation over the past 5 years for Horizon 3 to
Hmm.
operate within or anyone to operate within. And so what that means in the buyer standpoint is at the end of the day, the CFO is your buyer. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter what you're selling. You could be selling, you know, uh, cheese and crackers to the cafeteria. The CFO
Mhm.
is the ultimate buyer, not anyone else. Because if you can't clearly articulate a return on investment and business case, the CFO isn't going to make that purchase because you're in economically uncertain times. And so the CFO is going to want to make sure that they understand how to manage cash. So the hard part, the big struggle that most companies make, and most sales reps make as well, by the way, is arming your champion that wants to buy your product with the stories and data necessary to persuade the CFO that it's a good investment. Every company breaks down here. Even as we scaled at Horizon 3, like teaching and institutionalizing the discipline of ROI-driven selling was a challenge, and we had to adjust the way we did training and enablement accordingly. Now, in our case, we were very clear in the outcome we were delivering. You are required to run quarterly pen tests.
Mhm.
And you can either pay a human to come in 4 times a year, or you can buy my software, which costs the same as three humans a year. So you're going to save at least 25% moving to me. And that was the original part. So for the CFO, the financial case was easy. I can pay, let's say, $100,000 for 4 human events, or I can pay $75,000 and just buy Horizon 3. All right, I'm going to save $25,000. I'm going to be able to meet the same compliance requirement. Business case is solid. Let's go. That's how we're able to maintain such high transaction velocity. But most companies don't think about it this way. They preach religion, they sell religion, and they don't realize that they're in the business of selling candles, not religion, because every religion needs candles. And you've got to go off and actually understand how to arm your champion with the business case so they can persuade their CFO to spend money on this versus something else.
I think like if you have the right data or like some sort of like numbers, it can prove that's great. But like I think like nobody actually knows a benchmark of like what is a good number, or like they may quantify it as like the way that like you don't, it's like unfavorable for you. Like obviously, like I feel like, for example, I'm just talking about like reporting, right? Let's say you can tell them like, hey, we help you like avoid like, a $5 million worth of attack. Like these people can be like the data is stolen, could be this amount or XYZ, but they could argue with you like, that happened once in a lifetime, or like, it was not this year or something. So like I feel like people always want to see like crazy number of growth, or like, for example, if you're selling them, I don't know, like any type of software, I feel like it's very hard to quantify the data or like the business, like to like gave like a business case that your champion can like sell to the company on its own. Because sometimes like I feel like a lot of the very good CEOs, they will really focus on like the financial returns. Like it's like sales driven target. Maybe you're like helping them save money, but as long as it's not like the sales target, like, or like it doesn't really contribute to you that like, the sales target is like meeting or not meeting because of you, it's like very hard for them to like convince internally. So like how do you kind of solve the, if people focusing on like the revenue or like some numbers that are like kind of like you can't really demonstrate?
Yeah. Let's talk about that in the context of the last few years. At the end of the day, you had 2 schools of thought. You kind of have three different ways a business can operate. You're either going to grow at all costs, in which case your gross margins, your cost of sale, your customer acquisition costs, your sales efficiency metrics, none of that matters. The only thing that matters in growth at all costs is top line revenue. And there was a period of time where that happened. To be honest, we're seeing that even now in the AI hype, where it's okay if you sold a candy bar for $1, even though it cost you $3, because I just want you to sell as many candy bars as possible. I don't care if you're losing money on every one, I'll subsidize you. That only works for a very small window of time before the realities of economics catch up to you. The extreme opposite of that is extending runway as long as possible by being insanely efficient. So in that scenario, you're sacrificing growth for efficiency, and that's not great if you're trying to be a breakout company. So the middle is efficient growth, and that's really what is super important to build a sustainable, economically viable, IPO-able company. And efficient growth is all about, all right, how do I keep track of what is my customer acquisition cost? If I double that cost, what happens? If I cut that cost in half, what happens? What is the kind of the sensitivity of that customer acquisition cost? And how do I be very mindful in balancing capturing as much market share as possible with doing so in a financially responsible way? And that's where metrics like the rule of 40 come into play, where rule of 40 helps balance growth and efficiency, growth and gross margins. What's shocking to me at the moment is how few AI companies are actually economically viable despite their crazy multiples and valuations. And at some point, that bubble is going to burst, and they're going to have to find a path to being economically viable very quickly. Like we've seen this movie in the past, and so I think that's going to be the hard part: is efficient growth, balancing growth and runway.
Mm, I love that. I wonder, okay, so quickly saying hi to LinkedIn user from Delaware and hi Dan. So I wonder, so like I like what you said about like you have to like kind of like balance both growth as well as like um making sure that you also have some sort of like profit margin. And what would be a comfortable profit margin for you? So like I know like there's like statistics shows that like for like bootstrap founders that you supposed to have like 50% profit margin at the very beginning to like make sure your company succeed in the end. But for venture backed startup, like how do you think about like within 5 years we want to achieve like $100 million ARR? Like, you know, at the beginning maybe you take all the customers, like, and then how do you upsell them down the line? Or like do you just ever upsell, or like do you just take other clients that are just like new to like changing the pricing down the road? Basically how do you think about, because I like briefly did like mental math. It's like if you want to do like $100 million ARR, you need like 300K from each client. um
Uh, so look
well,
at
sorry,
it.
30K, 30K, sorry.
Yeah. So there are a few immutable laws of a company when you first start off. And let's take gross margins. If
Mhm,
you are a services company, a consulting company, your
mhm,
gross margins at 30% might be awesome.
mhm,
But if you're a SaaS software company, your gross margins are expected to be like at least 80%. I think that's a solid benchmark. So one, your margins really depend on the type of business you're in. But two, the way that you've architected your product, like there's a whole bunch of companies that I know of that are software companies with gross margins, say in the 50%. Let's say that's the case. If they surged all of their R&D investment to improve their architecture, maybe they can squeeze out another slight improvement. Maybe they
mhm,
jump from 50 to 60%. But to
mhm,
jump from like 50 to 90% is basically impossible. So
mhm,
you have now, as you've started a company and built a business, established an immutable law of that, a physical law of your business, which is your gross margins profile. And so you have to be very thoughtful and very careful in the architecture you bring to market.
mhm,
Understand the gross margins profile of that architecture and understand what levers you have available to squeeze out a little bit more margin. And if you are at if you're a software business at a 60% gross margin, you've got a pretty big product problem. And
mhm,
that's just not going to be sustainable and or viable
mhm,
or so on and so forth. So that's kind of one immutable law. The second immutable law is the effort to sell. If it takes 9 months and 3 sales engineers to get your product installed and up and running, okay. Um, if if you did an amazing work in fixing your product, maybe you got that down from 9 months to 7 months. But at the end, you still have mostly an immutable law on the effort to sell your product, and the effort is quite high. And there are a number of really big companies that have scaled, but they have very high effort of sale, which means their contract values have to be different, their sales prices have to be different, and so on. But if you can cut your effort to sale to be incredibly frictionless, it preserves a ton of optionality. So, for example, for us to be able to have a 32-day average sales cycle for the segment of the market means I have incredibly low effort to sell. Coupled with, say, best in class gross margins, what that gives me is a ton of optionality. So if I want to go enable partners, resellers to be motivated to work with me, because my gross margins are so high, I can take a little bit less margin and feed more margin to the partner to get them excited and get them motivated. So I'm able to weaponize my gross margins and use that to activate my distribution or reseller ecosystem. And back to scaling, like 0 to 1 million in ARRs is obviously very hard. 1 to 10 is hard. 10 to 50, totally different set of problems. The journey we're on right now, that 50 to 100, which is the segment, which is the part of the journey we're in the middle of now, totally different set of problems. And so in each of those segments, you're going to weaponize your gross margins in different ways. Early on, you'll give up margin to build partner ecosystem. Later, you can weaponize margins to make sure that you're the best price in a competitive situation. And so if you don't think about the effort to sell and the gross margins profile of your business on day one, you limit optionality and you artificially limit your growth as a company going forward.
For the 32-day sales cycle, like how much of it was like waiting, and then how many decision maker is like within selling this product?
So it goes back to what budget dollars are you targeting, first and foremost.
Mhm.
Do you have a clear budget you're targeting that you can take? In pen testing, you're primarily competing with mediocre consultants. So the
Mhm.
budget dollars are earmarked for consulting labor. There's no emotion to how those dollars get spent. And
Mhm.
so there's no emotion or minimal approval effort to redirect those consulting dollars away from the consultant to us. Right?
Mhm.
Cool. So really, and also pen test consulting dollars are recession proof. It doesn't matter if you're in a bear market or a bull market, you have to run a pen test for
Mhm.
SOC 2 compliance, for PCI compliance, and so on. So a recession proof, unemotional, earmarked budget dollar that we can take away from labor, from consultants, and direct towards us.
Mhm.
Awesome, right? That became really important. The next part is letting your results do the talking. So you have to design a product experience and a trial experience and a POV experience that is super focused, that has really clear success criteria, and you're working procurement in parallel. So a really good sales rep is not great at pitching. They're great at project managing the procurement process. That's their superpower. So as you hire really strong sales reps, those reps understand the procurement cycle of the companies they're working with, and they're working the procurement process in parallel to the POV, so that all of those lines of effort converge on a close date that both parties have agreed to.
Can you talk about like so I have two piggyback question from your previous answer. One is about you're like a sales guru, by the way. If you nobody tell you that. I wonder, so like when you're thinking about like the first 10 customer to not first customer, but like I guess like $10 million as like a benchmark to like, now it's like 50 to $100 million as a benchmark. Like these different three bracket of um sales motion, like what are like the different channel partnership that you will be doing to like using your word weaponize the growth,
Yeah, weaponize your margin. So
what weaponize your margin.
early on, as like a Series A B startup,
Mhm.
the really big resellers out there and value added providers, the Guide Points of the world, the Optives of the world, man, their sales reps are not going to care about you. Those
Mhm.
reps are going to go off and sell products that are going to help them hit their quota and hit their
Mhm.
accelerators.
Mhm.
And it's highly unlikely that a Series A company is going to get the attention that is needed at those really big national resellers. And I knew this from my experience at Splunk and elsewhere. And so we focused at the Series A level on regional resellers, the reseller that focuses only on like Austin or Jacksonville, Florida, or the DC market and so on. Because those regional mid-tier resellers, one, they're chomping at the bit for new product to push. They're much easier to work with. And the amount of deals to close and revenue to hit is much lower compared to what you would expect as a quota at a Guide Point or somebody else. So in the early days, we focused on regional resellers in the United States and then regional resellers in Europe. Now, as we built momentum and as we moved up market and the product continued to build a reputation for being awesome, then we started to move up into the upper end of resellers. Then we started to engage the Guide Points, the CDWs, the Optives of the world, amazing organizations with great trusted relationships. And so as you build credibility, their reps start to believe in you. And then as a rep takes down a major account with a really big sales deal, internally at those resellers, all the other reps are made aware. Like they have their own win wires. Those reps get interested. Now they've got a proof point that they can build off against. And so as you move up market with your customers, you can then move up market with your resellers, and those resellers become the flywheel that gets you more and more deals. So about 40% of my marketing pipeline is originated by resellers, by partners of mine. Those resellers are extending my sales reach, they're extending my marketing reach, and they're accelerating the sales cycle because they already have relationships and contractual paper in place with the target customer.
Mm. Did you like kind of like is this like a original pipeline that like you guys were doing at, let's call it like a Splunk or some other companies, or like did you have to learn this by yourself?
Um, I mean, once again, every job I took with the intent of learning an outcome.
Mhm,
So when I took the job at Splunk, um, part of the privilege there was learning go to market and leadership at scale from Godfrey, who was the CEO at the time,
mhm,
learning about how to scale a sales organization from Susan St. Ledger, who was the CRO at the time.
mhm,
And then all these other leaders at Splunk in different regions, Kevin Davis, who ran federal, Anthony Palladino on the America side. So my job as a CTO, yeah, I had a bunch of responsibilities, but my personal objective was to keep my mouth shut, listen and learn from these great sales leaders. So I understood how to actually build and scale a sales organization when the time came for me to go do it.
mm. Uh, I wonder, so like I feel like when you are, I guess, like if you're starting a company today, like in the AI era, so like what are something, so like obviously there's like AI in the company name, but I guess like which part of the product moat do you feel like you have that's like will make your product stand out? Or like do you feel like it's a distribution game at this stage? Just because like every AI company probably can do
Yeah.
like a very
So
overlapping function.
when you think about a moat, so one, every AI company is a data company first and foremost.
Mhm,
If
mhm,
you don't have your own proprietary collection of data that no one else in the world has, what's your advantage? You're just a wrapper on
mhm,
Anthropic, right? Or whatever. And we see a lot of those companies starting to struggle.
mhm,
So if you do not have a source of truth data that you're collecting that no one else in the world has, you're a wrapper. You don't have a data moat. So when I think about differentiation, I think about data, champions, and distribution. Data is proprietary data you're collecting that has a compounding effect of value. The more data I collect, the smarter my system must become. That is incredibly important in compounding data to create more value. If you don't have that baked in your product, you're just a wrapper and you're going to be wiped out or interdicted or disrupted. At Horizon 3, I run more pen tests a day than consulting firms run a year. We ran more pen tests last year than the entire history of computing. Every pen test collects telemetry and training data no one else has in the world. Not Anthropic, not OpenAI, not Microsoft, no one else, not Google, has training data and telemetry of production systems the way I have it. So I built a moat. That training data allows me to not only make my core product better and smarter, but it allows me to launch adjacent products that grab adjacent budget. So we're a multi-product platform. Pen testing was just the wedge. That's kind of the first part. Data advantage. The next part is champion advantage. You don't sell cybersecurity products through slick airport ads and steak dinners. You sell cybersecurity products by having like customers that love you tell their friends. It's all about champion-based selling and reference-based selling. And the only way to do that is to have an amazing product experience where your results do the talking and cultivate those users into champions. This is what Splunk perfected. At Splunk, when I was CTO, there were people with Splunk tattoos, fez caps, and capes walking around with,
kill me. I'm sorry. What?
and because they love the product. The product, they download the product, they troubleshooted an outage, they recovered a system, became a hero, told their friends, got the dopamine hit, and they got the Splunk tattoo. And so champions is a critical advantage as you build out your product. And then the third is distribution. To scale up from 50 to 100, from 100 to 300, it's all about distribution. Can you motivate and incentivize distribution partners, value-added resellers, and MSSPs to work with you to scale out and be that last mile of reach, especially as you expand internationally? So what's your data moat? How are you going to cultivate radical champions? And how do you build a distribution advantage? If you don't have those three things top of mind on day one, you better figure out how to get those top of mind, because you can't really design for those things after the fact.
I wonder, so like, is your space like a very blue ocean space, or like, because I think the thing is like, because I feel like I know that you are like one of the world's like top expert in the space, in the security space. But however, like I feel like I wonder, every company, not every company, like there's so many AI like SDR or AI customer success companies out there. Like that's just like every day there's like a new thing coming up. But in your space, do you feel like your product itself is something that's like very like popular for people to build, but like now obviously you guys have like a very strong moat because of you already collected the data like you mentioned, and you're on top of mind and you have the strong distribution. So I guess
Yeah,
like
it's a
in
good
terms of
question.
like yeah, sorry,
Yeah,
product selection.
yeah. So it's a good question. So first and foremost is we are the best. We have the best AI hacker in the world, right? And
Mhm,
but this is actually the hardest engineering problem to solve in cybersecurity.
mhm,
And the reason why is because you need to have three things hit technically.
mhm,
The first thing you need to hit is you actually need to have offensive cyber expertise and experience. And you're either going to pull that from the military and intelligence or from the criminal element, right? You're kind of in one of those two extremes.
mhm,
There's also, of course, a cadre of self-taught folks, but the two primary sources. Now, obviously, I'm not going to recruit from criminal element.
mhm,
And thankfully, and I had the privilege of serving within JSOC, I was able to meet and build relationships with the best offensive cyber operators in the world that were part of the U.S. military and intelligence community. And so as they retired from that community, they joined Horizon 3. And so I've got this unfair advantage of talent, and it's unapologetic and unfair advantage of talent. So you need this incredibly hard to find talent that knows how to hack in a good way. The second thing you need is talent that understands how to build large scale data platforms. Because if you're a data company first, when we run a hack, when we hack a bank, we're generating knowledge graphs with 10 billion nodes and edges in it on the fly. And that those nodes and edges are used to build 100-page prompts to query an LLM, or they're used with reinforcement learning to do next best actions and other things like that. So it's actually a pretty hard data analytics problem. And then the third is you need the right cloud platform architecture to actually be gross margin positive. And so you have to be really world class at building highly scalable, highly elastic cloud infrastructure. So you need to hit the bullseye or thread the needle on all three of those things technically. On top of that, you need the right user experience for aha moments. You need the right champion cultivation. You need the right distribution. Like you've got to thread a bunch of needles in order to survive this game. Now we're lucky in the quality of the team that we're able to build that we've threaded all those needles. There's going to be a number of startups that attempt, and I, having gone through the pain of trying to thread those needles, I hope someone else can figure it out because I love competing, and our results through talking will continue to kick their ass. But at the same time, it is really
mhm.
easy to miss one of those needles.
Wow. How do you think about fundraising? Because yeah.
Yeah, I have a love-hate relationship with fundraising. On the one hand, there are a few venture capitalists that are former operators, and I'm a big believer in working with VCs that have been in the arena. So the people that are on my board have actually been in the thick of running and scaling companies. Mike Robinson, who joined the board from Kraft, was the acting CFO of No Name. He was in the arena to help drive efficiency and growth at No Name. Ilya was in the arena building product at Google, who's on my board now from Signal Fire.
Mhm.
Nick Warner was in the arena as president of Sentinel One, who's now an independent director to help scale that company. And Lila and Aaron Jacobson from NEA were in the arena. Lila at Microsoft as deputy CTO, and Aaron Jacobson scaling Databricks. So the investors I work with have been in the arena. They understand startups have up cycles and down cycles. They understand there are rough waves and smooth waves, and they're going to be with you through thick and thin. But they're in the minority. most investors I deal with are skinny jeans wearing freshly minted MBAs that have never run a company before that opine on how I should be running Horizon 3. And those are the most dangerous because they overstate their qualifications, they overstate or pontificate opinions they read versus grit they've developed through experience, right? And at the sign of the first rough wave, they're going to panic and try to sell and freak out.
Mhm.
And so within the world of venture capital as a founder, you've got to be very careful and selective in who you want to bring on. I'd rather have no investor than the wrong investor is really the mindset. And that's just not how people operate or behave. And I'm very lucky in the quality of the board that I've got. And it's a huge advantage for me as a company.
I love that. Aaron was a past guest on our show, and then I actually met I'm pretty sure like I guess like Elia from like Signal Fire at like a previous like a house party somewhere. But I wonder when you are pitching to VCs, like I'm sure like do you go with like a list of VCs that you want to partner with, or like do they, I'm sure they come to you at a certain threshold, like how do you think about, also like how do you think about valuation as well, just because you are a profitable company, or like at least you're generating like large amount of revenue. um I guess like how do you think about the entire fundraising approach
Yeah.
as a founder?
Let's start with valuation. So a really hard part for founders in fundraising is ego.
Mhm,
And as a founder, there's a ton of ego around. I just got a 70x multiple with 12 million in revenue. I'm a $1 billion company.
mhm,
Like, look at us, we're unicorns.
mhm,
And on paper and in the press, that might look really cool.
mhm,
That's actually incredibly stupid. And the reason why is it's going to be really hard to attract top talent
mhm,
because the higher your valuation, the less upside you've got for your employees. And so, how are you going to attract the best CRO in the world or the best sales leader or the best marketing leader if you're already grossly overvalued? And now you got to bring these people in. And smart top talent, they know, they look at the valuations, they look at the upside, they figure out how much money they're going to make. So you don't want to get overvalued. There's a great clip, I think it's like Silicon Valley season 2, episode 1. I know that because I played the clip for my employees at our company kickoff earlier this year, where Richard Hendricks is in the bar with this one dude. He's like, I could have taken less. He talked about
mhm,
how he lost his job because when you take a higher valuation and more money, there are a lot more expectations with that as well. And the clock
mhm,
starts. You better have a game plan. So it is a double-edged sword. And if ego is driving your valuation desires, like I have to be a unicorn, blah, 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 you're setting yourself up to fail. And so the market's going to set the price. And in the grand scheme of things, I'd rather take a little less money, but from a better quality VC than take more valuation, but from a poorer quality VC. And select the board member first and then figure out the terms, right? A good board member won't have predatory terms either, usually. Kind of. Number 2 is the process of fundraising. Early on, your pitch, you're going to suck. You're just not going to be good at it. So you're always going to have VCs inbounding, partners inbounding, and then there's partners you actually want to work with. My approach has been I initially pitched VCs that I actually didn't want to work with. So I didn't care if they rejected me, but I got to practice and I got to hear their challenge questions and their skepticism because they are good investors, or at least they're going to have good questions. Whether you want to work with them or not is a different thing. So I view there's a whole bunch of VCs I view as preseason games. And then I start to get into slightly more interesting VCs that I would like to work with if it worked out. But if it doesn't work out, I won't be sad. And those become the regular season games. And then by the time I get to the playoffs, I've perfected my pitch. My data room is tight. I understand the challenge questions. I understand the direction they're going to go in. So I'm able to hit the playoffs and the Super Bowl in full stride. And that's the way I think about fundraising.
I wonder, so like when you're putting it together, like how much time do you give yourself? And how do you
Uh,
prioritize your own game? Like so that there's fundraising, there's building the product, building the team, and then catching up with all the AI trends and speaking at stuff. So how do you think about like your own? time structure for your?
So a big part is when you're fundraising as a founder, fundraising for the founder, the CFO is 100% full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
Fundraising for your CRO is probably a 25% time job because they got to come in and answer due diligence questions and that kind of stuff. And RevOps is probably a 50% job. So when you fundraise, you better do so knowing you've got to create capacity or stop a bunch of projects in order to pull that off. Number one. Number two is a good CEO and founder is going to take on the burden of the fundraising tax. And so the only way to really fundraise is to make sure you've got the right team built around you that you can trust and empower to deliver while you're distracted. And that's really important. You've got to shield your team from the nonsense and time wasters because there are a lot of VCs that actually don't have any interest in investing in you. They just want your data room so they can suck up a bunch of knowledge and use that to inform an investment in somebody else.
Oh,
And if,
100%. Like,
and if you, yeah,
how
like,
do
and
you
if you're not careful,
prevent that though?
you
Yeah.
can't. It's just part of the game. You just gotta be smart about what you tell them. My point of view is if my competitive advantage can't withstand a PowerPoint slide, I've got bigger problems. Right. And so for the most part, I could care less if my pitch deck's out there. I'll get annoyed, but I won't care as much because your advantage better be something deeper than a PowerPoint slide. But that's just the reality of it. I mean, I fundraised my D round. I started fundraising in October of last year. And then I had a personal thing. My dad was really sick, ended up in the hospital for an extended period of time. And he ended up passing away in January from cancer. But I was fundraising while my dad was in the hospital. And it got to the point where I couldn't focus on fundraising and caring for my dad. So I had to stop. And then I resumed fundraising in March or so. And then we refreshed. It sucks because I basically had to redo the data room twice. We built the data room in October, then we had to refresh the entire data room again in February. So a huge tax on my team, but it was the right thing to do with all the personal stuff going on. And then we got multiple term sheets and we were able to close. We got a great investor in NEA leading the round for us.
How do you deal with like when there's like a personal issue or like personal like concern that arrive, and then like how do you like deal with like these kind of stuff mentally? And then like when I'm sure as like a founder slash like business owner, like you really have, I guess, like a lot of like you probably have to take a lot of no's or like dealing with a lot of like rejections or like hardships. Like how do you mentally stay strong to like continuously going? Like do you like wake up in the middle of the night and be like, you know what, let's apply a job at OpenAI? So
Well, look, if you're starting a company and this is actually what really, to be blunt, like kind of pisses me off about the what's the code gen company whose founders got poached by Google and left all the employees stranded, Windsurf, right? So when you look at, if you're a founder, you took venture capital money, you hired an early team, you hired early employees. Those early employees could have taken more money somewhere else. They joined you because they believed in you, they believed in the mission, and their families are willing to make the personal sacrifice of working 100 hours a week for the potential payout because of belief, right? So for me as a founder and a CEO, it's not about me. It's about now the 270 families that all have brochures of beach houses and Stanford tuition and Porsche 911s that their families are expecting to buy as they get a massive payout from the exit of a startup. And that's why the spouses in those families are tolerating 50 to 100-hour work weeks for all the people that at Horizon 3. Like, it is a family commitment. I don't have work stress. I have family stress induced by work. And that's true across the board. I mean, I have 3 little kids. I started a company, cared for sick family members in the hospital while juggling 3 little kids and a very patient wife that was handling everything, every aspect of our lives, so I could go off and be an entrepreneur. So when I hear about other companies, Windsurf is the example where the founders took the payday and left all their employees out to dry. Like, that to me is just fundamentally unethical and wrong. And if you are an engineer looking to join a startup, you are joining that startup because you believe in the founders, and you want to make sure that those founders have your back, that they're not going to abandon you. And I think that's something that's going to be a real big eye opener for recruiting and talent going forward. It's like, are you going to get abandoned so that the founder can take a payday, or are they going to stick with this through the end and be the captain of the ship, whether it sails or sinks?
Wow. How do you think about recruiting? What do you think about Mercor or like these other like quote unquote AI recruiting companies?
Um, so recruiting is actually, let me answer another question, because I kind of went on a soapbox there for a moment. So when you think about leadership team, you think about personal, like for me, the anxiety I get from work. In 2022, when the markets turned and venture capital froze and you had to make really hard decisions on stuff, I did not have the leadership team at the time that I fully trusted and empowered to execute. So I ended up carrying the burden of all of those problems myself: financial reporting, HR, personnel management, go to market sales, engineering, product, so on and so forth. And it was awful, but it was just the reality of where we were in that stage of the company. And if you look at my team now, every function is basically the best person I've ever worked with. Like my CRO is the best CRO I've ever worked with. My people leader is the best people leader I've ever worked with. My legal officer is the best legal officer I've ever worked with, and so on and so forth. So I've continued to build out this incredibly amazing team. And what that means is when things go wrong, they're able to catch it and do something about it before it becomes a crisis. And that allows me as a founder to focus on product roadmap, evangelizing the market, working with big customers and partners, so on and so forth. So as a founder, your team is super important. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, for sure. But how do you kind of like find them? Oh, yeah, I feel like your team is like definitely a big component, but like how do you actually find people that you can trust with like some like really big issue? Obviously, I feel like at your stage right now, it's like very different than like, you and like two guy in a garage vibe. So I guess like recalling like the early stage or like earlier stage, but like your company also grow really fast, but like you also came from like a big companies, but how do you think about it? Like if you're like a first time founder slash like doesn't have like 45 years of experience in the universe, like how do you navigate like the crazy stuff that like, I feel like the most crazy part is always like if your big client or like 40 client drop out at once, like obviously that never really happens, but like you never know. And then there's like also like the up and downs. It's like, oh my god, the self doubting part. It's like, oh my god, am I doing the right things? Like, what if this strategy doesn't pan out? Like then you see like a five competitors that start copying five features. Like how do you kind of like funnel these like random thoughts to channel like the effective energy in yourself to like continuously keep working on this?
Um, Obviously, success makes that easier, but
Mhm.
it comes down to one: starting a company is a family commitment first. Like if
Mhm.
your family isn't on board, I said I had a wife and 3 kids when I started. If my family wasn't on board, this would be an impossible endeavor. And so first and foremost, it's a family experience. Second, second most, it's about the network and ecosystem you built prior to starting the company. So I was very lucky, having been a CIO. I had built a lot of meaningful relationships in the CIO and CISO community prior to starting Horizon 3.
Mhm.
So I had a very large network of people I could iterate with or brainstorm with or bounce ideas off of to help de-risk product market fit. And that was really important. And then the third one, and I made a mistake here. Early on, because of COVID, it was really hard to hire quality and know that they were committed to and they weren't like a North Korean engineer or something.
Mhm.
um, and so I hired people I knew. And I said, look, I know you. I know your integrity and your ethics. You may not know how to do this job entirely, but I have confidence you can learn it and figure it out. And so I had a lot of faith in people. And in certain cases, I had blind faith. Like there's just too much for those people to learn. And then I got burned by it because it was too much for them to learn on the job and they couldn't do it. And I ended up having to intervene and step in and do things. And then as COVID subsided and I could get back to proper recruiting and proper hiring and in-person interviews and whiteboarding people and getting to know people better in the interview process, I was able to, and as we got bigger, we were able to use like external recruiting firms and so on. I was able to really upgrade and bring in much higher caliber leaders that shared my same work ethic, my same values, same integrity and grit, and that were domain or subject matter experts and specialists in their area. If you look at my executive team, we all have a middle class background. We are all self-made. We all worked our way up through the ranks. We
Mhm,
all have a chip on our shoulder and we all have grit, right?
mhm,
The perseverance to overcome whatever challenges to meet our objectives and goals.
mhm.
I learned all that from my dad. Grit and perseverance and conviction and so on and so forth. And every one of us on my executive team has a similar story. And that's important um, because it's a level of struggle we can all identify with and we all bond over. And it drives the culture of grit, purpose, and impact throughout the company.
I love that. Okay, so on that note, I don't want to like take too long of your time. Maybe we'll wrap with a 1 minute fire round.
Sure, go for it.
Okay, what's your favorite book?
33 Strategies of War by Robert Greene.
Yo, who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party?
Yeah.
My dad,
Um, who made the biggest impact in your career?
my dad.
What does your dad do?
My dad was an electrical engineer.
Uh, I love that. So, like, where can we find you outside of work?
Where can you say that again?
Where can we find you outside of work?
Oh, where can you find me outside of work? I've got 3 little kids, 10, 6, and 4. I just bought an extra cycle with a little bench on the back for them to ride with me.
Mm.
So I look like an absolute dork riding around
Wait, it's not like
Tiburon.
the ones like with like 5 people or
Oh
something.
yeah. So like I've got my 4-year-old boy and my 6-year-old daughter on the back. They're hanging. My son's on his mountain bike in front of me. And if I'm not at home or in our office, I'm usually taking them for bike rides around Marin, like an absolute. I joked I look like a total dork, but I own it because my kids love it. My daughter and my son love sitting on it,
That's
and
so
you'll
funny.
you'll find
Oh
me
my
riding around.
god. Oh my god. Oh, I can't believe that person was you. Like, I feel like whenever I see it, I'm like so jealous because I'm like I cannot ride bikes, but I feel like that's like the most like fun activity as like everybody so is on the same bike.
Yeah,
It's so funny. Well, love that. Snehal, thank you so much for coming on the show today. It was such a wonderful conversation. And you're like such a public speaking king because I feel like you have like so much confidence and then you use like the powers of three. Like I feel like I try to do that, but I'm like constantly like brain dead from the conversation. But you're such a amazing speaker.
awesome. Thank you so much, Grace. I appreciate it.
Let me quickly end stream. One sec.